super excited to have you back. Let's see. We are recording this episode, which is a little bit different for us. But we're going to get this out to you soon. And we want to tell you all about what's happening in the market these days.
I'm glad you grabbed the intro because we didn't say who was going to grab the intro. So you just grabbed it. So that was great. But anyway, really quick before we jump into everything, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
You know, I actually wanted to tell you about an article that I saw. My husband actually sent it to me today.
Oh, JT.
Yeah, JT. Hey, honey.
Oh.
So the article that I saw this morning that I want to tell you about was a couple in Seattle.
Okay.
That looked at their finances
okay.
and decided it was better to sell their house in Seattle and retire and full-time live on a cruise ship. It was cheaper to do that than to buy a house and pay a mortgage.
Wow. That's intense.
Isn't it? I don't think I could do that.
What cruise ship? What cruise line? Hold on, we got to qualify this. What cruise line?
They actually they jump.
Oh.
So they'll do like a few weeks. They'll do like a 51 day on this one. And
gotcha.
Then they'll plan it. Well, they'll jump onto another one. And they try to have them back to back. So they have no gaps. The only time they actually sleep on land is when they can't do them back to back. That's what the article says.
Are there kids involved?
No kids.
No kids.
They're in their 50s.
Gotcha.
And
sell the house, retire, go live on a cruise ship.
They said they were able to pull it off for $43 a day on average. Not bad.
Best of luck to them. Best of luck to them. Wow.
Clearly, they either invest heavily in Dramamine or they don't have problems with that. So, yeah, that was my exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, well, enjoy that on the cruise line. I got back from Spain.
Yeah, you went
so that
to
was
Spain.
Awesome. And we didn't go on any cruises, but my son got to play some soccer over there, and
he got to play a lot of soccer.
Over there, and then Olivia, Melanie, and I we went out and saw all the sights in the city. So that was super cool.
That's super cool.
We're a young nation, folks. We are a very young nation. When
yeah, it's your first time over there, right?
Yeah, half of that city is older than our nation.
Yeah, well more than half.
Barcelona, by the way.
Yeah,
anyway,
they were in Barcelona.
But one thing I noticed over there, in the take note, Seattle, take note. In the major metropolitan area, there's no single family residences.
Yeah.
Zero, none. Everything's at least 4 to 6 stories.
True.
So we got lots of density to grow up in.
And most of it's hundreds of years old, So we've got plenty of space, no problem.
So time to tear down those 900 or 1900 built houses and let's build up.
You know, we see the 1900, 1910, 1920 sometimes. And that's, you know, actually, I'm excited you brought that up because we have an inspector here with us today.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking about inspections. And those are always the most interesting inspections in my eyes. They
Oldies
really
but
are.
goodies.
Oh, yeah.
So
I learn a lot about construction that way.
Before we bring our inspector in, should we do something?
Let's do rate the rates.
This is my micro clap because that's all we can do about rates right now. Little micro clap. Rating the rates. Welcome to Rate the Rates, this fine, beautiful May edition of Rate the Rates. It's no surprise. I don't think I'm going to tell any secrets here, but rates have gone up. And But long story short, there's some silver lining coming, and I just wanted to think about where we've been. We've talked about this a little bit. When we first jumped into 2022, rates were just right around 3%.
Yeah.
Now they're just right around 6%. And so, okay, we do some really quick math. The cost of mortgages has doubled.
It's completely doubled.
Right? It's doubled. So it's definitely working itself out in the market right now. People are making decisions on whether or not we should sell, whether or not now is a good time with rates being so high. Should we buy that house or what have you? The other interesting thing that we've been talking about is now that people are locked in at 2.75 or 3%, they're less likely to sell their house. They're
Much less likely.
Wait, I'm gonna sell this house when my cost of funds is 3%, so I can go buy that next house at 6%.
Well, and they're not only
I don't know about that.
less likely to sell it, when they move, they're less likely to sell it altogether because they're holding on to them for rental properties.
Yes.
You know?
So now here's the silver lining, and I'm loving this. You guys ready for this? Recession is great for rates.
Yeah.
Okay. Recession is great for rates. If you go back and look at every single recessionary time that we've had since the 70s to current, rates tick up, they peak out, and then they come back down throughout the recession and after the recession. So though it's pretty sticky right now and it's hurting because just 5 short months ago we had 3% rates, things will get better. But so just hang in there.
And I don't know about you, but what I'm seeing with my clients and with houses that are being purchased for my clients is a lot of arms.
I'm not impressive here. No. I spin. I'm a cycle guy, cycle bar. Love you guys. But so my you want to see my quads and thighs? Beefy. But anyway.
We're good.
So yeah, that's a very good point. The adjustable rate mortgages have actually, the spread between, we didn't talk about adjustable rate mortgages from the mortgage meltdown to current market, right? It just didn't make sense. You could get a better interest rate on a 30-year fixed than you could on a 5, 7, or 10-year adjustable rate mortgage. Yeah. So nobody looked at them. Now you're definitely seeing the spread on the Freddie Mac mortgage survey. The spread is now 1.3% in interest rate between a 30-year fixed and a 5-year ARM. That's pretty substantial, especially with folks that are looking to get into that house for a short term. It's a great tool to go out and acquire a house at a lesser monthly payment.
I'm seeing a lot of 5-year ARMs, 7-year ARMs, and frankly, most people don't stay in a house longer than 7 years. So it can very much be a good option for people jumping into the market right now.
Absolutely. But know your options after that adjustable rate period is up. It could go up, it could go down. It's going to adjust. So
hence adjustable.
Oh, so it's not just a clever name. Yeah. So there you go. There's Rate the Rates. I think we're getting very close to the peak. And I think once we get into a full-on recession, we're going to start seeing those rates come back down. Yeah. So there you have it.
And that's affecting the market in general. So just what the market's doing right now, we have seen a massive shift. As soon as the rates started jumping up, we started seeing less and less multiple offers. Now we see some houses sitting on the market for 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. We're seeing some multiple offers, but we're not seeing the 300,000 over asking like we were for a while. And it's very interesting to see because there's like a line in the sand, and if you listed after that, you missed the market. In addition, it's made a little bit more challenging by the time of year because a lot of people list their house in the spring. That's what people traditionally have done. So the point that the rates started going up was exactly the point that more inventory started coming on the market. Yeah. So it's slowed the market. Now, I want to be very clear. It is not a buyer's market in all means. It is still completely a seller's market. It's just the seller cannot demand as much as they were a few months ago. And on top of that, the buyer has a little bit more power, meaning they have the ability sometimes to do an inspection, to keep in their finance contingency, not give up their earnest money, things like that. So,
I took a note. I got to bring the buyer-seller meter. I have a buyer-seller meter. Ooh. So we'll adjust the buyer-seller meter every episode going forward. So stay tuned for next month. Yeah. June's going to kick butt. Yeah.
But it is very much going towards it's still seller. It's just not all the way seller.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a guest here with us today. Super, super, super excited to introduce you to Chris. He is our inspector from X Factor Inspections. Chris?
Hi, Darcy. Hi, Keith. How are you guys doing today?
Chris, what's up?
It's great to see you. Thrilled to have you here. I have been using Chris for the last few years on inspections. He is extremely, extremely thorough. Some people love that. Some people can't always take that. But I believe in a thorough inspection because I think people need to know what they're getting into. But his inspections take a little bit longer than most. What's your average inspection?
My average inspection is without wrap up is about 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then the wrap up can be, 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how much
And
there's
let's
to
keep
go over.
clear on the wrap up is I actually sit down with the clients, review the pictures. I go through everything that they need to know so that they can even have an informed decision before they actually get the report.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So true. Because oftentimes we don't have time when we're putting in offers to wait for the report. So knowing or even just having the ability to walk through what the person said in order to really get it in your head what you want to ask for, it gives you more time when you do that wrap up on site. So we have a few questions from our viewers.
Can I be the first one really quick though?
Go ahead.
With the name X Factor, does your intro, do you have like intro music? Does it have the same guy that does like the monster truck? X Factor.
No, actually, I don't have any of that. It's funny that when we were my wife and I was deciding on the name for the business, I was still working for an inspection firm at the time, and the X Factor shows and reality shows on TV were huge.
There it is.
So we kind of got into the thing, whereas I didn't want to get sued, but I also wanted to stand apart, from everybody else.
Yeah.
And X Factor has always been a way to stand apart before it became a reality show.
Right.
So that's why we ended up choosing on that.
Awesome. I love it.
That is it's a good name. I like it.
We'll sell you the whole report, but you'll only need the picture. You can use that.
And there's no Simon Cowell or other reality shows they have to deal with.
Right.
Nice.
All right. So we have our first question coming up. Let's see what we got.
What I'd really like to know is how can I be confident that I'm choosing the right home inspector?
Goodness, that's such a great question. In general, I get asked this by a lot of my clients. How do I know I'm choosing the right inspector? I certainly have my answer, but as an inspector, who's the right inspector? What should you be looking out for when you're choosing an inspector?
I think the biggest thing that in the inspection world today, even before you get the report, is the ability to communicate with the clients. The construction industry is very much like the golf industry and the horse industry, where they have all kinds of specific jargon that the layman doesn't always understand. And when you have buyers in a market where they are concerned with everything else, from, as you guys talked about, rates and the competitive nature and the client, the last thing they need is somebody to come in and muddy the waters with a lot of, overly complex terms and terminology that doesn't make any sense to them. The home inspector truly needs to be a chameleon. He needs to be able to talk to everybody, no matter what the makeup of their background, their education level, their finance level, and they need to be able to level the playing field so they can understand to a broad group of clients. I think the communication factor is a big key with that. The other thing is if you're going to be walking through this process with an agent, and your agent is a knowledgeable person, take what they have to say. They have inspectors that they have worked with for a long period of time. They perhaps even have 3 on their list to choose from that they have vetted, and use those resources. If you are going to make what is probably the most deepest and significant financial decision of your life in buying a home, and you're going to use your agent as the person who's the expert in your corner, then listen to what they have to say about home inspectors. And I think the last thing that you have to do with the home inspector is that you need somebody who exceeds the standards of procedures. Whether we're in Washington, where we're licensed and we have a minimum standard of procedures, or whether we're ASHI certified or internationally certified, you don't want the person who does the minimum standards.
Right.
In
anything.
In construction or whatnot. If we're building tract houses out there, a lot of those tract houses are being built to minimum construction standards. If you're already going to have a minimum standard there, you want the guy that comes in that's going to exceed the standards. So that they have an understanding, number one, they're not worried about being sued because they're exceeding the standards of procedures, but they're doing it because they think it's prudent for you and to protect you as their clients.
I think that's a really good point. There's a lot of inspectors these days that, in every profession, not just inspectors, but there's a lot of people that limit what they're doing because they're afraid of getting sued. Now, to a certain extent, I understand it. We're a very litigious
there you go.
Environment. But I want somebody who's going to tell it to me straight, as opposed to tell me, walk the line, because they're afraid they're going to get sued. So I think that's a really good point.
Well, and I mean, Chris, I love what you said about coming to the client and where they're at. I mean, a lot of clients don't know the difference between a regular outlet and a GFCI outlet, right? So you got to be able to contextualize what you're seeing into their vernacular so they can digest it and make that prudent decision on whether or not they're going to buy $1 million property or not.
And that's a great point you make, I mean, because as an inspector, you could be inspecting the home of a electrical engineer that has massive, electrical problems, and you need to be able to communicate with that person as an expert. But if the same house is being purchased by an electrical engineer, you need to be able to communicate with that person to impress upon them the importance of getting these things corrected. Without their technically understanding of, what components are in an electrical system and what they're supposed to do.
Yep.
Not to mention being able to communicate with the DIY expert, the electrical engineer that's done everything themselves and think it's done perfect when it always hasn't been. So
we call those Harry the homeowners.
Yeah.
Harry the homeowners.
Yeah. Hire the homeowners.
Nice.
I do think most agents these days have a few different inspectors that they rotate from. And the reason why they have a few is because it depends on what the person's looking for. If my client is thinking about doing a massive addition to the house, well, then maybe the inspector that I recommend is somebody who used to be a contractor, because they're going to have more knowledge that way. Or if there's some electrical concerns with the house, maybe it's somebody who has an electrical background. So oftentimes your realtor can guide you that way. That being said, you as the client has the final say. So
Always.
Please speak up. Let your agent know what your concerns are, and let your inspector know what your concerns are. I know one of the first questions Chris asks when he's talking to the homeowner is, what are your concerns and what's your long-term plan for the house? Because the inspection for somebody who's planning on being there for 3 years can look a little bit different than somebody who's planning on being there for 17 years.
That's a great point, Darcy. One of the things that I add levity to my introduction emails when I talk to people is I ask a lot of dating profile questions. Nice. And I refer to it as that, and I add the levity to the introductory email because I want to know them as clients. I want to find out the audience, and it sounds a lot like I'm doing sales, where I'm learning to find the needs of the people, but I'm not really doing that. I'm learning to find out what aptitude they have as far as what they can do and what they can understand when they're buying the home. And when they write back and they don't ask that questions, I actually just follow up again. I'm just like, look, I'd really like to know more about you guys so I understand how to not only, make this process educational for you, but also, quiet any concerns that you may have with that. And I think that, if there's at some point there is an introduction between agents and home inspectors, if you have a home inspector that doesn't take the time to get to know you, to find out even if you have kids, so that they can alert you to safety issues that they wouldn't necessarily bring up in another inspection report, but because it's railing for small children, for example, and their head could fit through it.
Yeah.
I spend more time on that because I know there's going to be infant kids running around the house.
Yeah.
So if you have a home inspector that doesn't take those time to find those things out and find out what your needs are, almost like a salesman, then you need to keep going down the list and find another home inspector who does.
Agreed. All right, we have another question on tap.
Sweet.
How bad does it have to be for an inspection to fail?
Yeah, this is a question as a realtor I get asked all the time. I first get asked, what's the difference between an inspector and appraiser? A lot of people don't understand that difference, and it's a huge difference. And then I get asked, well, how are we going to know that the house passed? What is your take on this?
Well, unfortunately, there's no one answer for this. There is no pass or fail with a home inspection.
Yeah.
And the best thing that I can tell is it's not quite an analogy, but homes are built long before most of us have seen them, and they will be there long after we either sell them or we forget about them.
Yeah.
They're designed to last generations, multiple generations. And it's really subjective to what the buyer is going to be able to handle. Number one, are they the DIY, and can they handle that type of work that they expect it to be able to do on their own?
Like JT.
Are they going into it saying, oh, I can handle that, without knowing the full scope of the issues when they start tearing things down? Or, excuse me, or do you have the other side of the token where they have a very expected short stay? They want to live in that house for a certain period of time, and then they want to move on and let the next person worry about that.
Yeah.
They're really deciding how ambitious the buyer is going to be. Number one, if you're not going to be doing it yourself, do you have the resources to potentially correct the things that do need to be corrected? Because my biggest thing as a home inspector is I'm not worried about, the biggest thing I'm worrying about is the resale value. And I'm not saying that the other parts aren't as important. Health and safety, things falling down, things that could kill people, those are definitely important. But when it comes to houses, a lot of problems can sit and stay latent for a long period of time.
Yes, they can.
And until they get corrected, you really have no idea what the scope of the work is or the cost of the work is. So to say pass and fail, wrong. You have to look at it from a relative point and saying, what is your ambitions with the house? Do you want to move into a house that is move-in ready and you don't want to worry about anything for 5 years till your son graduates and then you move when he goes to college? Well, then you need to be looking at, the house in a different way than the person who wants to be there for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And again, I hate to not answer your question directly, but there is no pass and fail.
Well, I think that's a perfect answer,
I
actually.
agree.
And, Keith mentioned my husband, JT. We intentionally bought a house that needed a decent amount of work. We knew that when we walked into it. And a lot of people do that. But what a decent amount of work to us is extremely different than a decent amount of work to this gentleman or to this gentleman, and to many of my clients. A lot of people think a decent amount of work is just painting. That's just the tip of the iceberg for us. Some people think, oh, well, we'll knock all the walls down and rebuild everything. So it really, really depends on your threshold. I often get into this conversation with my clients, not only on the quality of the house as far as the inspection's concerned, but also crime in the area, sex offenders, things like that. You can look up all that data, and my response on whether it's okay or not is going to be very different than the person sitting next to me on whether it's okay for them. So there is no pass or fail. It is you personally as the buyer, what you feel is a pass or fail.
Well, that's the cool thing about a real estate transaction in its simplest form. It can be so tailored to whatever you want to do, because people ask me that question all the time. What's the right mortgage for me? Well, it depends, right?
What are you trying to accomplish?
What are you trying to accomplish? How long are you going to be in the house? Should I pull cash? So, it's great that you take that time to get to know people and ask those dating type questions, so you can understand what they need and apply to it.
And this is my first podcast, folks, but if you notice the theme between the three of us here, there was no rehearsing or anything. But again, there's no straight answer for any question like that. There is no pass and fail. And if your agent, your loan officer, the inspector doesn't take the time to get to know you, to find out what your needs are, to try and fulfill, pick the next one on the list.
Move on.
I want to compare this to dating, because you brought that up. This is not like picking who you're going to work with for these professions. This is not like a swipe. Right,
no.
You got to get into the details
is that
to
Tinder?
find out. I think that's Tinder. I don't know. I've been married too long to know. But this is not like just a swipe. Oh, that looks good. No, you need to ask the questions and get to know these people and make sure that they're looking out for your best interest, no matter what.
You need to interview them.
Yeah.
You
really
need to
should.
treat it like an interview, no different than you were hiring somebody. And if you don't have the background or whatnot to, ask those open-ended questions like you were in an interview, then have your agent do it.
That is a great analogy.
Yeah.
You are the CEO of this transaction, and you're hiring people. You literally are hiring people to represent you and work in your business, which is transacting real estate. So you should go through that process of interviewing those people to work in your business.
I've had 2 clients interview me in the entire time I've been doing this business, which I think is pretty crazy.
And it's true, because when I send out those emails, more than 50% of the time I have to send a follow-up and say, hey, I'd really like to know more about you, other than just confirm see you at 10:30 on Tuesday.
Right.
I'd really like to find out what your needs are and whatnot.
It's so important. It really is. All right, Jay, what do we got next for us on the Questions?
What is the craziest thing you have ever found in a home inspection?
You must get this question all the time.
And you know what? Because this is probably the most common question, it is very relative. Because nowadays, in today's day and age, what it might have been shocking 10 years ago would not have been shocking today. Since we're talking about home inspections as homes, we'll take away all the personal. I say the biggest thing that I'm surprised by is the people that don't realize I'm going to be in the house for 4 hours.
Oh.
And they don't realize that I'm an inspector who by nature is observant. And they take no steps whatsoever to prepare the house
Like
for
personal
the inspection.
effects and stuff?
Personal
Oh,
effects. I'm
personal
not talking
effects.
cleanliness or whatnot. I'm talking personal effects.
Right.
But the biggest thing that I think I've ever been surprised by is a home that was less than 8 years old and had raving reviews on the MLS listing. It also had nothing on the seller's disclosures. They had only had one owner in less than 8 years. And it had 3 different attic hatches. And when I went into what was probably inaccessible to 9 out of 10 inspectors, to the 3rd attic hatch, I found significant fire damage. And
wow.
We have a picture here to shows one of them that you guys can see. And this was a perfect case where it was billed as, a turnkey home, which I think as an industry term means you can turn the key, you move in, and you're ready to go. This house had significant fire damage to the point where I said, I recommended they inquire with the homeowner and check any insurance claims related to this because the amount of damage that was in it was significant. The odd thing about, homeowners and homes in general is that you can actually still use materials that have been burned in a fire as long as the density and the integrity of the material satisfies certain percentages. And this house was well exceeded that. This was a charcoal condition, where there was a significant attic fire with heat buildup. And there was nothing mentioned. No one ever knew. And from my understanding, I was the 2nd or 3rd inspector in that home and didn't notice, nobody noted that damage.
And looking at that picture, it looks like somebody put a new board in.
Oh yeah, it was
like,
definitely reinforced. The picture, you'll just shake your head if you're a homeowner. But case in point,
somebody knew about it.
Somebody knew about it. It wasn't in the disclosures. Somebody knew about it. Whether or not somebody knew about it enough to file an insurance claim, they knew enough about it to make repairs.
Wow.
But nothing ever got disclosed. And the attic hatch where this was going into was full of nice, custom shelving in a closet. So I had to exceed the SOPs by removing those to get into that. And I not only had it open 3 or 4 millimeters and I could smell the carbon, hitting me in the face.
So SOP is a standard
operating procedure.
Yes.
So okay.
Making
so
sure for all of us.
Super important though. This is a really, really good point. The getting into places.
Yes. Oh yes, please.
The standard operating practice for an inspector is if you can't get in it.
Well, there are, for instance, crawl spaces have certain measurements that if it doesn't satisfy those measurements, a home inspector doesn't. I'm not going to bore you guys with the specifics, but what it really comes down to is the health and safety of the inspector. And at any point, the inspector can say, I don't feel safe accessing this area. I'm not going to be inspecting it. They disclose it. And generally that's the end of the conversation. The home inspector has every right to say not to do that. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. For instance, we have hundreds of homes and thousands of homes here in the Seattle area where we didn't have the basic requirements for access to crawl spaces back then. And it's a 1930 home, but I know that I need to get into that. And because I have the frame, I can get into a crawl space that's less than 18 inches. But most inspectors would either turn away from it because they couldn't access it physically or they didn't feel safe to doing it. But that doesn't do your client any good, And the last thing as an inspector, I try and do is I absolutely avoid trying to say, I'm signing out of this one and you need to call somebody else, because that doesn't do anybody any good. Right. Because you've delayed the transaction where now another person has to come out and do that. So I do everything I can to make it happen on that visit. Because the last thing I want to do is, if after 4 hours being there, sit down with a client and say, we need to get somebody out here to knock open that crawl space open bigger so that I can safely get in there and make it happen. In this particular case, what we're talking about is that the custom nice shelves were in a simple closet, and they were put in a way where I just couldn't get the access. And, with
They left this much
Yeah,
access to the crawl
literally.
space or
but,
the attic space.
Here's a perfect example. If I did not exceed those SOPs,
Mm-hmm.
the couple loved that house even before I did the inspection.
They always
without
love the
knowing
ones-
anything. And I couldn't go into a first-time buyer's home with, them loving it that much and knowing that I had my spidey sense was tingling. And I was like, I need to get into this attic hatch. And lo and behold, I got into that attic hatch, and that's why it was so difficult to get in there.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that was the reason why it was put in there, but the idea that somebody didn't know anything about this was just ludicrous to me.
Yeah, asinine. So that brings up a really good point. Like when we do FHA financing and VA financing, we have to get access to the attic and the crawl space.
They have to
So
take a picture.
If you're having issues on the inspection side of things, if you're with one of those two underwriters, you're going to have an issue with the mortgage.
It's very true.
So
And that's a great point that you bring up, Keith, because going back to the minimum operations of a home inspector, if, for instance, let's say we're doing an older house in Seattle and she has knob and tube wiring, a lot of home inspectors are gun shy to bring up the fact that it's common knowledge that even big agents like State Farm and institutions like that will not insure knob and tube homes.
correct.
Wouldn't you rather find out at the inspection stage than 1 week before closing when they get the appraisal back and the appraisal guy actually noted that there was knob and tube wiring?
Right. Because there's a picture of it because they opened the attic hatch and there it was.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, not everybody takes that approach. And what ends up happening is the client waives a right because they think everything's fine.
Financing.
Financing, right? And then
Inspection.
they cannot get that insurance, so they can't get the financing, and they've lost their earnest money because
Yep.
they didn't get out earlier. So the earlier you know, the better.
I'll give you a perfect example. I posted a knob and tube article on a home inspector's blog. And, I talked about, I wanted to make it a communal effort where all home inspectors can contribute to this article and say, hey, if you have definitive knowledge of a major carrier not insuring because of knob and tube, please list it here so we can create a column list. More than 50% of the people who commented are home inspectors, and they said, that exceeds the SOP. Don't put yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
And once again, do you want the guy who's doing the minimum standards, or do you want the guy who's going to help you out, 3 weeks earlier than before you lose out on a heartbreaking deal?
Yeah, time is money and knowledge is power. And if you don't have the knowledge to make sure you have the proper plan in place, because just really quick, this is my old insurance hat. I'm not, a regular homeowner's policy is probably 1/5 the amount if you have knob and tube. If you have knob and tube, you can probably multiply that annual policy by 4 to 5 times, and that's what your policy is going to be.
And you may know this better than me, Keith, but it's probably going to be some type of assigned risk policy, and you're probably going to get it from a carrier who's the same carrier who insures the guy with 3 DUIs.
Yeah, it starts with an F.
You know.
I'm going to leave it right there. Going to leave it right there.
my goodness.
But anyway, yeah.
We've actually been at some pre-inspections together. I'm thinking of one in particular that we were there for maybe 6 hours. I mean, this house had a lot. It was a small house, but it had a lot going on.
Okay.
And another inspector showed up, and he was wearing like dress pants and a dress shirt. And I'm like, this is the inspector?
Was he going to church?
He looked like he definitely could be going there. I mean, I think he had like a Rolex. Like, he was dressed up. He was there for less than 45 minutes.
What?
And he took one look into the crawl space, a quick picture, and then like never went into the crawl space, never went into the attic. And we're sitting there like, are you kidding me? There is enough going on in this house to look at for days. There's so much. Remember that one?
Trying to be as diplomatic as possible, but I call those the checkbox inspectors. There's a lot of preference, sadly enough, from agents who just want the checkbox inspector who literally has a pre-made form on his form and he's checking boxes. And for instance, outside of our area of concern, but Texas has a pre-made form for home inspectors that is a checklist box that they are required to use.
And that's it.
And you just check boxes. And by the time that guy is going into it, or girl is going into his car, he's already sending the report to the agent from that inspection.
Holy
So
cow.
there was no narratives, there was no context of actually addressing items found to that specific house, to that specific client. It was all a checkbox.
And I'm not trying to knock the inspector because I don't know what he was hired to do. I really don't. But if he was hired to do a full inspection, that did not happen. Sometimes people hire an inspector to do a quick verbal walk through.
Walk and talks.
Yep, walk and talks. And there are very few times that I think that's a great idea, but they do get hired for that. And I think on my side, to be careful, the agent that is recommending that's all you have done, I'd be a little leery of that too, because sometimes people are just trying to get the transaction through as fast as possible and not looking out for your benefit.
You know what? That was a very diplomatic answer, Darcy, and I'll just take the pressure off of all of us and speak in terms of my insurance carrier. I got the best insurance carrier out there for home inspectors, $1 million, blah, 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 blah. No assigned risk, which means it covers me for pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Even in that case, they ask me every year, and they use a different form of vernacular, but they basically ask me, do you do walk and talk inspections? If I say yes, they insist, or they will not cover me. They want me to use a complete separate disclosure and inspection agreement when I do walk and talk inspections. I don't do walk and talk inspections. I tell clients straight up like that when they call. I said, no, I do not do them. I do a full inspection. I offer it in pricing. It is a different way, not plugging myself here. But if the inspector's insurance carrier doesn't want you doing walk and talk inspections, why would you hire anybody to do a walk and talk inspection?
That's a really good point.
Wow.
That's a really good point.
There you go.
All right, we've got another question.
One of my favorites.
This is fun.
I'm not sure, but some sellers provide a pre-inspected house, and I'm not sure if I should trust them, or like, how can I know if an inspection is like something I can trust?
This is an awesome question, and I get asked that all the time because in this crazy market that we've had, a lot of sellers are providing pre-inspections.
Sticky wicket.
And should the buyer trust them? I have my opinions, but what's yours as the inspector?
Well, as a home inspector who has done pre-listing inspections for that, I can tell you is that this is where you need to use your agent and their expertise. If your agent has the inspection report on file and they give it a green light, assuming your inspector is knowledgeable and experienced, then go with what they had to say. But if you have an inspection report that's on file that is check boxes or doesn't have a lot of narratives, and what I mean by narratives is explaining in detail the defect that they found and being able to read it from a whole complement of people who could be potentially looking at that house, then you need another inspection report.
Yep.
It's been the trend lately, and I'm not even sure if you guys are aware of this, but the trend lately has been not to include the entire inspection report, but just to include the inspection summary.
No way.
And sometimes the summary's like
No
2 pages,
way.
no pictures, just a few words here and like, it's horrible. So I always go back and ask for the whole inspection. I want to see what happened.
Yep. By looking at the inspection report and not just a summary page, you can see, first thing you can do is you could take 5 minutes and compare and contrast whether they're doing the minimum SOPs or not.
Right.
It's literally listed on every Washington state licensing website. You can go find it easily. Just look for Washington SOPs for home inspectors, and it'll tell you exactly what we're supposed to do. And if you compare the report and it has just those minimum findings for the SOPs, then you need somebody who wants to exceed the SOPs. The other easy thing to do is find the name of the inspection firm or the company, and then go find out how much they charge. If they're the first ones on Google for the $350 flat rate inspection, find somebody else.
Gotcha.
It's a good point.
Gotcha. Good point. Very good point.
There was a pre-inspection. This was this past summer that we did. There was an inspection provided to us, This was in Seattle. Remember that one? So
was that the one with the when they did this? You did the sewer scope the same day as me, and then it was completely blocked.
Yeah.
Perfect example, folks.
This one was a great example. The inspection wasn't horrible, but it gave both the buyer and myself kind of the this doesn't feel like it's telling the whole story. So we brought Chris in. One of the things that was missing on the inspection report was the entire front of the house was pulling away from the rest of the house. The whole front wall was just falling down.
Was it brick?
Yeah.
Brick veneer?
Yep. Just
nice.
They forgot to mention that part. So
separate of veneer and frame.
Yeah. We did not end up putting an offer in on that house.
Was that the one where the MLS said new roof this year and they only re-roofed the front of the house?
No, that was a different
one.
That
was another one.
Yeah, it said new roof in 2022, and it was just the front that had been replaced. They weren't wrong. It was a new roof, but the whole back was ancient, and you couldn't see it any way other than getting
I don't know. I think that's a little unfair and deceptive because if I think new roof, I
one would think the whole thing.
So if you say new tires on a car,
only one of them.
Do you only count that when you replace one tire?
That's a good point.
I mean, if you say new tires on a new car, I'm like, okay, it's all
it's tires.
And the home inspector would say, and what about the spare?
Yeah, right, exactly. Oh, right? Wow.
So, there's so many different factors. I'm gonna tell you guys about an offer that I got this morning. The offer, it has nothing to do with inspections, but it's perception, right? The offer in the email, the agent said waived appraisal, waived inspection.
Okay.
When I got into the offer, they did not waive the appraisal. They did not waive the inspection. And when I questioned her about it, her response was, oh, well, we're just letting you know we're not going to do anything if stuff comes up for that. Well, that's not how you wrote it in the contract, right? So you just need to be aware that what people say doesn't always match what's happening.
I'm going to put on my dad hat for a second.
Yeah.
I tell my kids every day, what you say matters. So what you say and how you say it matters. So make sure you say things in the correct way.
Yep.
One thing about inspections that I wanted to share, from the lending seat, we never want to see them.
Oh,
never.
Yeah,
never. I just want to put that out there really quick. Lenders, we got past that when I got into the industry in the late 90s. We did. We requested them. If they were a condition of the contract, they had to be in the file. Now we don't, even if they're a condition of the contract that you have to get an inspection, we do not want to see the inspection. So do not send it to your lender. You guys are adults. Use your agent, use your inspector to vet any issues with the property. Lenders never, ever want to see an inspection.
Never, ever.
Unless you want a total headache of a transaction from that point forward. Because the second a mortgage underwriter sees an inspection, everything that was highlighted maybe needs help has to get fixed. Yeah. And it creates a very bad situation. So never send your inspections to your lenders.
Just don't do it.
Going back on that one a little bit, Keith, on to what you said earlier about FHA and FA, perhaps you could drill down on that because I'm getting these common questions a lot too, especially if, for instance, an FHA or VA appraisal is there after me.
Which they always are.
Because generally in it, and if I understand correctly, it's mostly because of the Great Recession and how lending practices changed. But even those guys are doing far more than they used to be required to.
Yeah.
As far as when they're looking at, health and safety stuff within the house. So,
or in the barn.
Or in the barn. Yeah, there you go.
We had one of those recently.
And we're saying this a lot, folks, but Darcy and I have only been working together about 2 years, and we have all of these experiences that we have come across already in just 2 years. So it shows you how prevalent they are actually out there occurring in the real world.
And the most recent example for the VA loan that he was mentioning that has to do with the barn, Chris did the inspection. He pointed out, hey, this does not meet code. Yeah. If it was a conventional loan, the appraiser would have never touched it. They would have never called it out.
Nope.
But because the VA is stricter and they're trying to protect the vets a little bit more.
Same with FHA.
Yep. They call out different things. And in this particular place, they called out that the railing in the barn,
Or no railing in the barn. Well, there was a handrail.
There was just nothing
It's
between
made out of timber.
Yeah.
It was a pretty
Yeah, it
cool
was-
handrail.
Yeah.
Peeled
All
pole.
boned.
Yeah. So the handrail was there, but there was nothing between the handrail and the stairs. And it would be easy for a child or a clumsy adult,
Or a
for that
clumsy
matter,
adult, yeah.
to fall through there.
Happens.
And they called that out. So fortunately, Chris had mentioned it in the inspection report. So it was no surprise to us, the agent and the client. But we had to go down and fix that in order for the loan to close.
Yeah, Chris, to your point, what happens a lot, well, first of all, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, or FHA and VA, they have to get in the crawl space. Number one, if they can't get in the crawl space, they will call it out subject to, and I've had this a couple times. There was once where they had put, they put the hot water tank on top of the crawl space hatch. So they're like, well, we can't get in there. You're going to have the hot water tank removed so we can get into the crawl space. So FHA and VA have to get in the crawl space. They will also get up, possibly up on the roof, or they'll at least get a ladder to visually inspect the roof at eye level. In Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac world, they just look at it from the street. Like, oh,
There's a roof.
looks pretty good. I can't see any granular defects. I can't see missing shingles if there are one on a different hip or the back dormer. You can't see anything on the backside. So FHA and VA definitely take a higher level of understanding and due diligence. The interesting thing is when these types of things come up from the client, it always comes up like this. Oh yeah, that was disclosed on the inspection. I'm like, yeah, we got to fix that. Yeah. So crawl space stuff, roof stuff always has to get addressed.
And this is going back to what we talked about earlier and getting to know the clients, both with, the agent level and the inspector level. I took the time to know that these folks were VA and that they were getting a VA loan. So when I'm on site, I'm basically saving them 2 weeks of headaches by calling that railing out now. And by the time the appraiser got out there, it would have delayed their loan and their transaction until they got it fixed. If they waited to find out until then. But at least having a knowledge of what the clients were trying to do and having the knowledge of what FHA and VA inspectors are looking for, I can help, shorten that time period, return time, by saying, hey, this railing is going to get called out by a VA appraisal every day.
Well, and it's important today with the pace of the market that you don't miss your closing dates. And if you can save that time, it's huge money in your pocket.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to move into our Mythbuster now.
Ooh.
Everybody ready?
Okay, let's grab it.
Mythbuster.
I think these are going to be too big.
I miss Mythbusters. Adam?
Yeah. There we go. We don't have the headsets on, so it's
we don't have
it
those
just
on, so
falls
it's too
right
big
off.
today.
Well, you got to just pull a little.
I don't have all the hair.
I know. I got hair now.
Is this what I look like when I come out of a crawl space?
Yes, pretty much. Like you're going skiing. Okay,
Okay, here we go.
this is a really, really big one,
This is
guys.
my favorite question for Chris of all day.
Yeah, it is
This-
a really good question. I get asked this constantly.
I get asked this all the time too.
I'm buying new construction. I don't need to have a home inspection, right?
I don't.
Am I allowed to answer or do I have to wait for the question?
Hold on.
Please, this is a myth.
Yeah.
You need a home inspection. Houses are made by people. People make mistakes. You need a home inspection.
We need to rephrase this because Darcy, you were really polite.
Yeah.
This is how it comes off. I'm buying new construction. I don't need an inspection.
Yeah.
That's the mindset that people walk into new construction with.
Right.
And Chris?
Yeah, Chris,
What
tell
say
us
you?
what you find.
Well, I am a great fan of the old Mythbuster show, and I would like to have a giant buzzer that says "Myth busted, busted, busted."
Yeah.
It is a total myth. For an example, I'll respond with another question: is that when you bought your new Tesla, did you not walk around it before you drove it away and signed the check?
Ooh.
Well, I paid before I got it, but but when it was delivered, I did walk around and look at it a lot before I signed the paperwork.
You go to buy a diamond ring for your fiance or an anniversary gift for your wife. Do you not look at the diamond and have it, in the,
So true.
Yeah. So the biggest thing too is, regardless of even if it's a custom home, is what you said, that these are made by people. And for those of you who don't understand, the tract home definition is that, for instance, a guy who's doing the tile work has probably 3 jobs that he has to do during the course of that week on brand new homes. And it doesn't have to be a 2,000 home development up in Everett. It can be, this Pacific Ridge builder has 8 homes in Mill Creek, and he has another 5 blocks down the road in unincorporated Linwood. These guys have X amount of work orders to accomplish. Yep. And his first tile job in the master bathroom of the first house might be impeccable the first day. But as he gets tired and he does that second one, and then in between the second and third one, he gets a call from his wife that's saying the kid's being bad at school again. He needs to go get picked up. Now things start going faster. Or you start seeing that you run out of materials and you have to do something different as far as the design. Yep. If there is one thing today, I'm not so much worried about the construction methods because we have so many redundancies in place nowadays with building inspections and city inspections and county inspections, but it's the quality of work and the quality of material that we're doing because we're in such a haste to build these things.
Yeah.
So true.
We're doing things, faster than we ever could try and do and to fill needs that we couldn't possibly fill unless everything was perfect for the next several years, which is not going to be the case.
Nope.
And in many cases, for instance, when I do final walkthroughs, I literally see superintendents going to find another house and they cannibalize screens from that house to bring it over to the new house. We have a lot of different AV pictures here that are all new construction, new pictures.
Yeah, let's pull these up.
Let's jump into it.
But it all comes down to quality of work. And, we have guys who say they're master carpenters that have been doing it for 2 years, whereas historically we had master carpenters that did it for 20 years.
Yeah.
20,
so true.
These first 3 pictures that we're looking here is actually a brand new home. I was doing the home inspection 2 days before the final closing.
What are we looking at?
We are looking at mold all over the crawl space.
Already?
Brand new.
The evil M word.
Yeah. Now, legally, I'm not allowed to tell you that it's mold unless I actually took a sample of that and identified the species that it's actually growing there. But that is a brand new crawl space that was less than 6 months old.
Wow.
So your inspector is going to refer to that as organic growth.
Unless he actually tests it and, identifies it, but I don't, need to go out and tell you that is organic growth. Now, here's the thing about new construction. You're just like, oh my God, it's so prolific. These pictures are actually showing, we don't know if that came in there with it on the material.
So true.
Or if it was wet and then it was put in a closed crawl space. This is construction dust in a brand new, I would estimate, heat pump controlled, $15,000 to $20,000 heating and cooling system with construction dust all over it. The motherboard and, the blower fans in there will not keep up to drywall dust. Good builders cover this stuff up so it can't get in there. Wow. But obviously this case, that should be, what you're seeing there is my finger stroke.
Yeah.
And how shiny brand new stainless steel should be. Now, I don't care what you say. No matter how well you clean that motherboard, it's an electronic circuit.
Yeah.
It is not new anymore.
No.
So here we have, this is PEX hidden by insulation in a crawl space, brand new home. Wasn't delivered to the buyers yet. And this is all that darkening is wet insulation. And that is the area directly underneath that I found.
Oh.
And where the main line comes in, you can see the PEX kind of dangling there, the blue line.
Yeah.
But that was all wet in a brand new 3,000 square foot home that was being sold for $1.2 million.
Nice.
And then here we have construction pictures of a brand new deck. This is in Lake Stevens. This house was still at the stage of final walkthrough, and we have no positive connections, which means engineered strapping or bolts on, the posts and anything like that. No stringer hangers on the stairs.
It's just free floating.
It's all face nailed, no bolts or screws.
Oh my gosh.
And this is on a, call it a second story deck, with steps going up.
Right.
And this is brand new construction.
Wow.
This is an open sewer line in a crawl space, letting all kinds of sewer gas into the crawl space.
Yum.
The people.
Luckily, it's just the gas.
It was 3 hours before I got in the crawl space when I started it, but inside everybody complained that there was a weird smell. You know, this was actually during COVID, so I was wearing my mask at the time. But when I got in the crawl space, I was able to pinpoint where the smell was coming from. This is a brand new home.
Yeah, this is one of mine.
This is a Darcy client. This is me looking at Hardy Board, and I'll say Hardy Board, not knowing that if this is Hardy Board or not. But Hardy Board is the most recognized fiber cement product, so I use that as my common term. But that's just showing how they did what was going to be a cap over system, which means they didn't lay the trim and whatnot into the Hardy Board like it's supposed to. They capped it over it. And this is a brand new home where they were actually building it to the wrong specifications per the manufacturer. Yep. So this is a brand new home, not even, hasn't even been handed over. This is actually less than a few weeks old. This is a sprinkler leak. Most new homes have sprinkler systems for fire suppression system. This was a sprinkler system leak that they swore to the buyer that it was only isolated to the small little area in the HVAC closet on the second floor. And it turned out that it went beyond the closet into the adjoining rooms. What you're seeing there in the thermal imaging is a darkening of the area. The density changes because of the wet in the padding and the carpet. And when I got there, none of this was pulled up. The builders had already said that they did what they needed to do to mitigate the issues. And I'm just like, there's still moisture everywhere in this house.
So that's what it looks like right now.
That's what it looks like, there. Just plain without thermal imaging. You would never know it.
And so that's a really good point. I see inspectors that don't use thermal imaging. They would,
So thermal imaging is a great new concept for home inspectors. And remember, it is not an end all. It is another layer of diagnostics. You know, it is a way for me to say, to make my point, to say, hey, this is retaining moisture. And in this particular case, this is after I pulled back the carpeting because the builder said, oh, it's just, just a little bit moist, it'll dry. I'm just like, no, the carpeting, the padding is wet and you have OSB underneath. It needs to be pulled up and you need to get
delaminate it.
Yeah, you need to get some fans from Miller's Rental and dry this place out.
Amen, go Miller's.
And that is the garage below the HVAC closet upstairs.
Geez.
All the blackening is where that red in the right-hand corner is where the builder opened it up and said, that's where it all leaked from. And I said, no, this drywall is wet. Take a look. So I not only hit it with my moisture meter, but also my thermal camera to show that the builder needed to remove at least half the drywall because that's where the sprinkler was going.
And that's probably all wet insulation in there too.
Oh yeah.
100%.
That would just.
But the point is that they only opened that one little area thinking it was sufficient.
Wow,
to dry
we were
that
all
stiff
intense.
area.
We were all leaned in like, whoa.
Yeah. Those are some great photos. I know I myself have seen mold in carpets. I have seen mold because they didn't let things dry out before putting the stuff in. I've also seen, a house that they had the gas on, but they put the stove in place, but they never actually hooked the stove up to it. So we're all hanging out in the house, and then they took out the gas meter and said, "Get out now."
Yeah.
What if that family just moved in, went to bed that night?
Didn't have an inspection.
Didn't have an inspection.
Or that they were they were smoking in their house.
That too.
Right? I mean, people still do that.
The true thing is here, folks, is I could have presented you with so many audio visual aids that you guys would have been bored. We could have made our own YouTube video about, defects in new construction. These are just examples.
Jay's all for it. He's like, let's get that
these are
going.
just examples.
Yeah.
And these are in literally the one with the thermal imaging was not even a month ago. In a brand new townhome in Edmonds. That was a townhome that was being built for $975,000.
Jeez. Now, I want to be really careful, right? Like, we're not villainizing new construction.
No, in no way.
No, not at all.
We're typifying the importance of why you should have an inspection done.
Absolutely.
Right? And the preconceived notion that, it's brand new out of the box, I shouldn't have to. Right. In a perfect world, you shouldn't have to. However, there's a human element. So just get it inspected.
How many people have bought something new on Amazon only for them to send you what was somebody else's return?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Would you just eat it?
Yes.
Yep.
Or would you send it back and pay for the new one?
My last ring light that I got I was like, oh no, this was repackaged and resent to me. And I didn't like it.
And again, it is not for instance, the townhome in Edmonds, they built probably 50 to 75 in the Edmonds, Montlake Terrace area, and I inspected more than one of those houses. And in one of them, you know, I sat down at the end with the clients and I said, there's really nothing here. I could nitpick to death and not come up with any significant. But the same builder, the same townhome, the same design, other than maybe different colors, and we have all of these prolific issues.
I'll say one of those pictures was from a house that the client specifically chose that builder because that particular year they were rated number 1, least amount of complaints, amazing, and they end up on here.
Right.
So you just never know.
I mean, I think we all do our best. And I think what makes a builder, like any other tradesperson or professional, it's when you have those mistakes, owning up to them and fixing them. And you know,
you know, builders can either love or hate guys like me. You know, there's no gray area. And I always try to make the relationship with the builders as important as I do with the clients, because there's a very good chance I'm going to see them again. And I will say, you know, to the credit of the builders who built this house in Edmonds, which had the sprinkler leak, they did what they were supposed to do. You know, they exceeded the expectation. Now, would they have exceeded the expectations if they had an inspector show up without a thermal imaging camera and other things? We don't know that. But in my opinion, when I pulled the client aside, I said, look, these guys are doing right by you. I don't want to push them too hard.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, I'm going to give you the tools that you need to have the intelligent conversations with them. If for some reason they push back, then bring me back in. Yeah. But they did what they were supposed to do.
Nice.
And
there you go.
Literally, now other builders will just be like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Yeah. Perfect example today is that, you know, I'm doing a lot of inspections where they use little rubber gaskets on nails for roofing nails.
Oh yeah, right.
Those little rubber gaskets, they're cute, but they're completely ineffective.
Yeah.
And my opinion is to this day, I'd still rather see a mastic on top of it. And good roofers will literally clip a little 1 inch by 1 inch square and then put it on top of that mastic. But I'm always going back and forth with those guys, and they'll just come out and say, no, we're not doing it.
Gotcha.
You know, just because that's the industry standard.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the code. It's not what what is correct, but that's the industry standard. So
good old industry standard.
We are absolutely thrilled that you were able to join us today.
Yes, absolutely.
This is my first podcast. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes.
Well done. Well done. You nailed it.
Yeah, we're so lucky to have you come in and share some of your experience. Hopefully you at home were able to learn a lot about why inspections are important and choosing the right inspector is important.
If you have any questions, let us know. Drop them in the chat.
Absolutely.
Let us know. We'll get them over to Chris and get them answered for you.
100%. And as always, if you're looking for a realtor, a lender, or an inspector, we're here for you. Give us a call.
Yep. Like, share,
Subscribe.
and comment, and subscribe. Yeah. So
Subscribe.
have a great day and join us next month for Realty Expert.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.